There are moments in Genoa City when the illusion of control shatters so completely that even the strongest begin to question who they truly are, beneath the roles they have fought so hard to maintain. And this is one of those moments when choices are no longer strategic moves but desperate reactions to forces already spiraling beyond containment. When the past resurfaces not as memory but as a living, breathing threat that demands to be answered, and when every decision made in the shadows begins to echo loudly enough to destroy everything built in the light. Adam is the first to feel that fracture splitting through him, though he would never admit it aloud, not even to himself, because for someone who has spent his entire life clawing his way out of darkness, the idea of willingly stepping back into it feels less like a tactic and more like a surrender. And yet that is exactly what he is doing as he embraces the identity of Spider once again, slipping into it with a precision that is almost terrifying in its ease, as if that version of himself never truly disappeared but merely waited, patient and silent, beneath the surface. The deeper he moves into Las Vegas's underbelly, the more that persona begins to consume him, not just as a disguise but as a truth he cannot fully reject. And what begins as a calculated attempt to gain Riza's trust slowly becomes something far more dangerous, a psychological unraveling that blurs the line between who Adam is and who he used to be. The memories return not in fragments but in overwhelming waves, each one carrying the weight of regret, violence, and survival. And with each passing moment, he feels less like a man in control of a mission and more like a man being dragged backward into a version of himself he once feared he could never escape. Riza watches him carefully, sensing that there is more beneath the surface than he is willing to reveal, and that suspicion creates a tension that neither of them can afford to ignore, because in a world built on deception, the smallest crack can become fatal. Adam knows this, which is why he pushes harder, leaning into the darkness, allowing the sharp edges of Spider to re-emerge, believing that if he can convince her of that identity, he can get closer to the truth about Matt. But what he fails to fully acknowledge is the cost of that performance, the way it begins to reshape his instincts, his reactions, his morality, until the mission itself becomes secondary to the transformation taking place within him. And somewhere beneath all of that calculation lies a quieter, more unsettling realization that part of him does not want to let go of Spider, because Spider does not hesitate, does not doubt, does not carry guilt in the same way Adam does. And in a world where hesitation can mean death, that version of himself feels not only useful but necessary. While Adam is battling the ghosts of his past, Nick is creating a new nightmare of his own, one that is far less controlled and far more immediate, a descent that begins with what he convinces himself is a choice, but quickly reveals itself to be something closer to inevitability. The streets of Las Vegas do not offer redemption, only temptation, and Nick walks directly into it with a mixture of defiance and quiet desperation, as if daring himself to see how far he can fall before something or someone stops him. When he meets the dealer, there is no hesitation in his actions, only a grim acceptance of what he has already become. And when the fentanyl is placed in his hand, it feels less like a transaction and more like a confirmation of a path he has already chosen. The additional substance offered to him is where the true danger lies, not just in its physical impact, but in what it represents. The escalation, the crossing of a line that cannot easily be uncrossed. And for a brief moment, there is a flicker of resistance within him, a recognition of the risk, of the consequences, of the version of himself he is abandoning. But that moment passes quickly, swallowed by the weight of everything he is trying to escape. The anger, the disappointment, the sense of failure, all of it converges into a single, destructive impulse. And he gives in, not because he does not understand the danger, but because part of him no longer cares if he survives it. What makes Nick's situation even more volatile is not just his addiction but the timing of it, the fact that Matt is already circling, already closing in, already aware that Nick is vulnerable, and in a world where weakness is exploited without mercy, that vulnerability becomes a weapon waiting to be used against him. Nick does not yet realize how exposed he has made himself, how his choices have created an opening that someone like Matt will not hesitate to exploit. And as his grip on reality begins to slip, so does his ability to recognize the danger closing in around him. Back in Genoa City, the conflict takes on a different form, quieter on the surface, but no less intense beneath it, as Tessa and Daniel find themselves standing at the intersection of opportunity and consequence, forced to confront not only what they want, but what they are willing to risk to achieve it. Danny's proposal arrives like a spark in the midst of uncertainty, offering a chance at something bigger, something meaningful, something that could redefine their futures. And for Daniel, it ignites a sense of purpose he has been struggling to reclaim, a reminder of who he used to be before everything became so complicated. But for Tessa, the situation is far more layered, far more fragile, because her life is not defined solely by ambition but by the relationships she is trying to hold together. And the idea of stepping into a new opportunity is overshadowed by the fear of what it might cost her, particularly when it comes to Mariah, whose trust has already been tested in ways that cannot easily be repaired. The tension between desire and responsibility becomes almost unbearable, as Tessa is forced to confront the possibility that pursuing her own dreams might once again come at the expense of the stability she has fought so hard to rebuild. Daniel, caught in his own internal struggle, begins to see the offer not just as an opportunity but as a lifeline, a way to move forward, to escape the weight of his past mistakes, and yet even he cannot ignore the complexity of the situation, the way their decision will ripple outward, affecting not only their own lives but the lives of those around them. The excitement of possibility is tempered by the reality of consequence, and as they both grapple with what to do, it becomes clear that there is no choice that does not come with a cost. What ties all of these threads together is not just the individual struggles of each character, but the underlying theme of control, or rather the illusion of it, as each of them attempts to navigate a situation that is rapidly slipping beyond their grasp. Adam believes he can control his descent into Spider, but the more he embraces it, the less certain that control becomes. Nick believes he can manage his addiction, but each decision pulls him deeper into a cycle that is increasingly difficult to escape. Tessa and Daniel believe they can weigh their options carefully, but the emotional stakes of their decision make objectivity almost impossible. And looming over all of it is the presence of unseen forces, of individuals like Matt who thrive in chaos, who recognize weakness and exploit it, who understand that the most effective way to destroy someone is not through direct confrontation but through the slow erosion of their stability, their identity, their sense of self. The question is not whether these characters will face consequences for their choices, but how far those consequences will extend, how much they will lose before they are forced to confront the reality of what they have become. There is a sense, almost palpable, that everything is building toward a breaking point, that the tension cannot continue to escalate without something giving way. And when it does, the fallout will not be contained to a single storyline or a single character, but will ripple outward, affecting everyone connected to them. The danger is no longer hypothetical, no longer something that can be avoided or delayed, but something that is already in motion, already unfolding, already shaping the future in ways that cannot be undone. And perhaps the most unsettling realization of all is that none of them are entirely innocent in what is happening, that each of them has made choices that have led them to this point, that the lines between victim and architect have become so blurred that it is no longer possible to separate them. And in that ambiguity lies the true power of what is unfolding, because it forces each of them to confront not just the external threats they face, but the internal ones they carry within themselves, the fears, the desires, the weaknesses that make them vulnerable in ways they cannot fully control.